The forest was very quiet today. It's always quiet, but today it was different. Something about the trees surrounding me here on the east side of Mount St. Helens was keeping secret. What makes this place especially intriguing is the events that transpired here nearly a century ago. Though the site of the supposed battle is unknown, I imagined what it must have been like here during the summer of 1924. Most of the trees here are second growth, smaller and younger than those you'll find elsewhere on the mountain. Eruptions, landslides, and avalanches associated with the blast removed a lot of soil from the area, leaving it looking more like a moonscape than a forest. On a clear day, you can see 4 miles. This observation tower, built on stilts, is one of the few structures in the area built after the eruption. That is you uncompromised by the movement of the land beneath it. There, you can still see sections of the highway that was built in the 1970s just before the eruption, buried under a thick layer of volcanic debris. Several trees had been marked with fresh claw marks, and as I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw a patch of smashed saplings and a set of extremely large footprints pressed into the soft mud beside the trail. I kept my eyes open, watching for movement through the dense foliage, but saw nothing except for a lone deer. The eruption completely changed the landscape of the area, killing hundreds of thousands of acres of forests and drastically altering local watersheds. My original plan was to hike all the way to the Ape Canyon campground, but the trail was muddy and slick from recent rains, and I had a long drive home after my visit to the Ape Canyon area. And while much has grown back since then, Mount St. Helens continues to steam and rumble, reminding visitors of the volatile nature of the landscape. I picked up some interesting clues while I was out there, but nothing definitive. An acoustic phenomenon known as the canyon mode can cause sound to reverberate within the canyon walls, prolonging and amplifying sounds produced at one end. This is why it can be difficult to speak to someone on a cell phone while hiking in a canyon. The canyon walls reflect and amplify sound waves, making it seem like the person on the other end is speaking very loudly. Given the acoustic properties of Ape Canyon, it is easy to imagine how the miners inside the cabin could have interpreted the commotion outside as coming from much closer than it actually was. While I wasn't able to find the site of the alleged cabin, I did discover a few things that I think could shed light on what really happened here in the summer of 1924. The combination of sensational newspaper coverage and local folklore made Ape Canyon a local sensation. Just remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, even if it isn't true. And while there is no evidence that anything weird ever went down there, the area's association with the mysterious event has ensured its legacy. And that includes Ape Canyon. Despite hearing frequent reports of claw marks on trees, I have yet to see any that are actually fresh. And while there are many footprints reported in the area, none have ever been verified as Sasquatch. Not really. While the Bigfoot attack of 1924 may or may not have happened here, the forest continues to be an amazing place, worth visiting. But more grounded theories hold that the men either witnessed something they didn't understand, like a bear, or created a monster in their own minds due to extreme stress. and isolation. Was it a band of ape-like monsters attacking a cabin, or was it something more mundane? The most popular explanation is that the miners were targeted by a group of local youths who were bored and looking for some excitement. The boys would have used the acoustics of the canyon to their advantage, hiding near the mouth of the cave, and making their voices sound like they were coming from inside the canyon. Whether you're interested in Bigfoot or not, the strange tale of the attack adds an element of fun to a hike in Ape Canyon, which is usually pretty crowded. Perhaps the men were suffering from stress and fatigue and driven to madness, destroy their own shelter. Some have even speculated that the men were witnesses to the destruction of their cabin by a landslide or some other natural event, and made the whole thing up to cover up the loss of their supply. On my visits, I was surprised to find practically the whole trail to myself. And while I didn't see any Bigfoot, I did see fresh tracks in the mud and a few claw marks on trees. These kinds of signs are fairly common in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. And seeing them always gets my hopes up that maybe I am actually going to catch a glimpse of a Sasquatch this time. Even if you don't see any Bigfoot, you see plenty of evidence of the tremendous power unleashed by Mount St. Helens in 1980. If you know where to look, it's easy to spend a whole day exploring Ape Canyon and not see anyone else. In this part of the forest, you can see how quickly things are growing back in the area. Second growth trees sprout from the ground beneath the canopy of older trees that survived the eruption and the fire. All around me were signs of regrowth. The North Fork of the Tutul River, which is mentioned repeatedly in accounts of the attack, no longer flows through this area. It was rerouted during the cleanup following the eruption. So if the cabin really was here, it probably ended up in the river somewhere. The observatory itself sits atop hardened lava flows that spilled out of the crater shortly after the eruption. And while much has grown back since then, Ape Canyon will likely never look the same as it did before the eruption. Here, trees grow large and strong, their roots interlaced beneath the soil. Even broken tops of trees stay upright, creating a dense network of branches overhead. Walking in these old sections of forest feels very different than the heavily impacted areas. It's darker here, quieter, too, as though the trees are swallowing up sound. There's something comforting about this kind of forest, as though the trees have seen it all and nothing phases them anymore. Maybe I even get lucky enough to find some physical evidence left behind by the mysterious assailants. It's here, according to stories that appeared in Washington and Oregon newspapers in the summer of 1924, that a band of ape men attacked a cabin occupied by 5 gold miners. Their whispers were barely audible over the steady rush of the Tattle River, and though I was alone, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. It's easy to feel that way in Ape Canyon, a deep gorge carved into the mountainside by the now vanished North Fork of the Tuttle River. I hiked down into the canyon, hoping the isolation might help me tune out my thoughts, so I could connect with the energy of the place. As the trail descends into the forest, it passes a sign warning visitors that the area was heavily impacted by the volcanic eruption of 1980. Yet, despite all that has changed here, in the past 100 years. The basic geography of the place remains the same. If this really is the site of the Battle of Ape Canyon, it means that not only were the Sasquatches real, but somehow the blast and subsequent changes didn't affect their presence here. Or maybe the whole thing happened somewhere else entirely. A side trip to Johnston Ridge Observatory offers amazing views of the crater and surrounding peaks. Eruptions, avalanches, and mud flows completely reshaped the landscape, carving valleys, building new ridges, and burying everything in a thick layer of ash. I continued my hike, passing through a section of the forest that had been decimated by the 1980 eruption. Boom! Only to be wiped out again by the 2008 La Grande fire. But there was something else in the forest, too. Evidence of large animals moving through. But my favorite feature of Ape Canyon is the old growth forest you find along the river. In the heavy shade of the old growth forest, it was cool and damp, almost silent, except for the rush of water from the Tattle River nearby. After spending some time exploring the lush old growth forest, I headed back up the trail. On the drive home, I reflected on my experience. Did I sense anything unusual while I was out there? And while the area has been heavily impacted by both volcanic activity and human use, there are still places you can get away from the crowds. Despite the lack of traffic, the question of whether or not the ape men ever attacked a cabin in this area remains. First, the 1980 eruption removed a lot of sediment from this part of the Tuttle River, changing its course in some areas. Second, the shape of the canyon may have played a role in what happened here in 1924. Finally, while there is plenty of anecdotal evidence suggesting the presence of Bigfoot in this part of the country, there is no physical evidence to support the idea. So what really happened in Ape Canyon in the summer of 1924? Another theory holds that the miners themselves were responsible for the destruction of their own cabin. Fred Beck, who wrote a book about the ordeal many years later, believed the ape men were extra-dimensional beings coming from another plane of existence. Regardless of what actually happened, the story of the ape men of Ape Canyon is a fascinating look into the public's fascination with Bigfoot and other cryptids. For hikers who love a good mystery, the woods will always be full of strange sounds and shadows that might just turn out to be Sasquatch.